Picture a man standing in a wheat field, under stars that seem to pulse and dance. This is Vincent van Gogh in his final summer, painting with the desperate intensity of someone who knows his time is running short. Each brushstroke a prayer, each canvas a confession of a heart too full for this world. Tonight we journey through the blazing decade that gave birth to some of humanity's most cherished art. From the coal-darkened villages of Belgium to the sun-drenched fields of Provence, we follow a soul who painted not what he saw, but what he felt burning within. In his early years, we'll discover a failed preacher who found his pulpit in pigment. He transformed rejection into revelation, learning to speak through color rather than words. Then watch as Paris ignites his palette. Japanese prints and impressionist rebels teach him that shadows need not be brown, that light itself can dance on canvas. Feel the Mediterranean sun of Arles burn away his northern gloom. Witness sunflowers bloom like suns themselves until that terrible December night, when inner demons manifest in blood and bandages. Finally, glimpse behind asylum walls where cosmic visions swirl into being, where olive trees twist with ancient wisdom, where a simple night sky becomes humanity's most beloved painting. Through Vincent's eyes, we'll see how suffering can be alchemized into beauty, how loneliness can birth connection across centuries, how a man who sold only one painting in his lifetime became the very definition of artistic genius. So close your eyes and let his story wash over you like waves of color. Know that every struggle, every triumph, every brushstroke leads us closer to understanding not just an artist, but the very nature of human creativity itself. In the Dutch countryside of 1853, Vincent Willem van Gogh enters a world of Protestant severity and merchant prosperity, the eldest son of a pastor who expects conformity, but births a spirit too wild for any conventional path. The parsonage in Zundert sits like a grey stone in a sea of green fields, its walls echoing with hymns and prayers that will haunt Vincent's dreams, long after he's traded scripture for paint. His father, Theodorus, moves through their home with measured steps. A man who believes God's order can be imposed on chaos, never suspecting that his firstborn carries within him a fire that will consume every attempt at containment. Young Vincent wanders the heather-covered moors near Zundert, collecting beetles and bird nests with obsessive intensity, the same intensity that will later drive him to paint sunflowers until his fingers bleed. He catalogues each specimen with a naturalist's devotion, arranging them in careful rows, studying the iridescent wings of beetles, as if they hold secrets about beauty that adults have forgotten. His younger siblings watch from windows as he disappears into the purple distance, returning at dusk with pockets full of treasures, eyes full of something they cannot name, a hunger for meaning that no amount of bread or prayer can satisfy. At 16, he's thrust into the art-dealing world of Goupil and Company, surrounded by masterpieces he can't afford, developing an eye for beauty, while his heart grows bitter at commerce's cold touch on sacred art. The Hague branch gleams with polished floors and gilt frames, each painting reduced to its price tag, each customer evaluated for their purchasing power, rather than their capacity to see. Vincent stands behind the counter in his ill-fitting suit, watching wealthy collectors haggle over canvases that make his soul ache, learning that in this world, beauty is merely another commodity to be traded. His uncle Cent, who arranged this position, speaks of advancement and security, but Vincent sees only cages made of gold. The rejection letters pile up from art dealing, from teaching, from theology school, each failure carving deeper grooves of self-doubt in a man who feels everything too intensely for a world that demands emotional moderation. London dismisses him for recommending paintings based on their spiritual power, rather than their market value. The boarding school in Ramsgate finds his teaching methods too passionate, too personal. Amsterdam's theology faculty declares him unfit for the pulpit, his sermons more like fever dreams than proper exegesis. Each door closes with a sound like thunder in Vincent's ears, and he begins to wonder if perhaps he was born into the wrong world entirely. In the Belgian coal mines, Vincent discovers his calling as he sketches the soot-covered faces of miners, finding in their suffering a mirror of his own spiritual hunger and the raw material for his artistic awakening. The boronage spreads before him like a vision of hell made manifest, black pyramids of slag, air thick with coal dust, children who've never seen their own faces clean. He descends into the mines with the workers, feeling the mountain's weight pressing down, understanding for the first time what it means to labor in darkness. His evangelical mission transforms into something deeper as he gives away his clothes, his food, his very bed to these forgotten souls, recognizing in their bent backs the same burden he carries in his heart. His first serious drawings emerge from this industrial hell. Potato eaters with gnarled hands, peasants bent under life's weight, rendered in charcoal as dark as the coal dust that coats everything in this forgotten corner of the world. The sketches pile up in his sparse room, each one an attempt to capture not just appearance but essence, the way exhaustion lives in the slope of shoulders, how hope flickers in eyes that have seen too much darkness. He draws by candlelight after 18-hour days of ministering, his fingers black with charcoal that mirrors the coal dust under the miner's nails, creating a visual gospel for those who cannot read. Brother Theo's letters arrive like lifelines, carrying not just money but belief in Vincent's vision. When the artist himself can barely see, through the fog of his own despair and society's constant rejection, 4 years younger but infinitely more practical, Theo writes from Paris, where he's making his way in the very art world that expelled Vincent, sending small sums that mean the difference between survival and starvation. More precious than the francs are the words of encouragement, the gentle suggestions that perhaps Vincent's true ministry lies not in preaching, but in bearing witness through images. Their correspondence becomes the foundation upon which Vincent will build his entire artistic life. The Amsterdam theology studies crumble under Vincent's inability to master Latin and Greek, but in his failure blooms the realization. He must preach through pictures rather than words. He sits in lecture halls where ancient languages float past him like smoke, meaningless syllables that cannot capture the burning truths he feels. His uncle Johannes, respected theologian, watches with dismay as Vincent fills his notebooks not with conjugations but with sketches, hands in prayer, faces lifted toward light, the architecture of faith rendered in quick, passionate strokes. The dismissal, when it comes, feels less like failure than liberation. Walking the countryside around Etten, Vincent begins to see the world as a canvas, the way afternoon light transforms a simple haystack into something sacred. How a peasant's weathered face tells the story of all human struggle. He carries his sketching materials everywhere, stopping mid-stride when the light catches a tree just so, when a figure in a field arranges itself into a composition that speaks of eternal truths. The locals grow accustomed to this strange son of the pastor, who stares at ordinary things as if seeing miracles, who draws their daily labour with the reverence others reserve for saints. His first oil paintings emerge clumsy and dark, but pulsing with an emotional honesty that makes academic technique seem like empty posturing. He's not painting what looks right, but what feels true. The paint fights him at first, too thick, too thin, colours muddy where he wants them to sing. But something in the resistance of the medium speaks to Vincent's own struggles, and he begins to see each failed canvas as a step toward a new language of expression. In his parents' garden shed, converted to a makeshift studio, he battles with colour and form like Jacob wrestling the angel. The family grows concerned as Vincent's letters become manifestos about art's spiritual mission, his behaviour more erratic, his appearance more dishevelled. They see madness where he sees divine calling. His mother, Anna, finds his paintings disturbing, too dark, too intense, nothing like the pleasant watercolours proper people hang in parlours. His father conducts family prayers with extra fervour, as if enough scripture might cure whatever affliction has taken hold of his eldest son. They whisper about institutions, about treatments, never understanding that what they call illness, Vincent experiences as the first stirrings of authentic life. In The Hague, Vincent studies with Anton Mauve, learning to see colour not as decoration but as emotion made visible, each hue carrying the weight of human feeling. Mauve, established and respectable, tries to channel Vincent's raw talent into acceptable forms, teaching him the technical skills his passion lacks. But even as Vincent absorbs lessons about perspective and colour mixing, he chafes against the conventions, sensing that rules might polish his work, but could also polish away its soul. The studio smells of linseed oil and tradition, but Vincent brings with him the scent of earth and desperation. His relationship with Sian, a pregnant prostitute, scandalizes his family, but reveals Vincent's desperate need to save broken souls, seeing in her abandonment a reflection of his own rejection by respectable society. He finds her by the soup kitchen, belly swollen, face marked by hardship, and recognizes a fellow exile from the world of the comfortable. Their domestic arrangement, Vincent, Sienne, her daughter and the coming baby, creates a strange family, built on mutual need rather than convention. He draws her constantly, finding in her worn features a beauty that academic models lack, a truth that pretty faces cannot convey. The Potato Eaters emerges from this period, faces lit by lamplight, hands that know only work, a communion of the forgotten that Vincent renders with the reverence others reserve for saints. He paints the scene from memory and sketches, 5 figures around a humble table, sharing potatoes and coffee in a ritual as sacred as any Eucharist. The painting struggles to be born, version after version rejected, colours adjusted, positions shifted, until finally the truth of it emerges. Not beautiful by any conventional standard, but honest in a way that makes beauty seem beside the point. This is Vincent's manifesto in paint, declaring his allegiance to the overlooked and underloved. Leaving Holland feels like exile, but Vincent knows he must seek the light that will transform his dark vision into something that can touch hearts across centuries. The familiar landscapes have given him all they can. He's documented their shadows, their weight, their earthbound beauty. But something calls him toward brightness, toward colours he's only imagined, toward a way of painting that might finally match the intensity of his inner vision. His family watches him pack with relief disguised as concern, grateful perhaps that his difficult presence will trouble some other place. Paris beckons with its revolutionary artists and electric atmosphere, promising the artistic education that no academy could provide, and the brotherhood of fellow rebels against convention. Theo writes of the Impressionists, of artists who paint light itself, of conversations in cafes that reshape the very meaning of art. Vincent reads these letters like maps to a promised land, imagining himself among these pioneers who've thrown off the shackles of academic tradition. The city of light calls to one who spent too long in darkness. The decision to join Theo in Paris marks the end of Vincent's apprenticeship in suffering and the beginning of his brief, blazing career as one of history's most beloved painters. Everything until now has been preparation, the failed vocations, the rejected love, the dark paintings that few understood. He stands at the threshold of transformation, sensing without knowing that he has less than 5 years to paint everything that burns within him. The urgency that's always driven him takes on new meaning, as if some inner clock has begun its countdown. As the train carries him toward the city of light, Vincent stares out at the passing landscape, seeing not just fields and villages, but the raw material for an artistic revolution that will change how humanity sees beauty. Each tree blurring past the window becomes a lesson in movement, each shift of light a revelation about colour. He carries with him a few canvases, too dark for Paris perhaps, but honest in their darkness. In his worn suitcase rest the tools of his trade, and letters from Theo promising a small room, a fresh start, a chance to finally become the artist he's always known himself to be. The Dutch countryside falls away behind him like an old skin, and ahead lies Paris with its promises and perils, its lights that might illuminate or consume. The train wheels beat a rhythm like a heartbeat, carrying Vincent toward his destiny, toward the blazing years that will transform him from failed preacher to immortal artist, toward the light that will both reveal and blind. Paris, in 1886, explodes around Vincent like a kaleidoscope. The Impressionists have shattered the old rules, and suddenly his dark, heavy paintings seem like relics from another century. The boulevards pulse with a new kind of energy, artists arguing in cafes about light and colour while Vincent stands at the threshold of transformation, his Dutch peasants and potato eaters tucked under his arm like memories from another life. Theo meets him at the station, and Vincent barely recognises this sophisticated art dealer as the little brother who once collected beetles with him in the Brabant countryside. The city's very air seems charged with possibility, each street corner offering glimpses of a future where paint might dance rather than brood. In Père Tanguy's paint shop, Vincent discovers Japanese woodblock prints that revolutionize his understanding of colour and composition, teaching him that art can be both decorative and deeply spiritual. The old colour merchant, with his revolutionary sympathies and gentle heart, becomes Vincent's guide to this new world, where cherry blossoms can carry as much meaning as crucifixions. Vincent spends hours studying Hiroshige and Hokusai, tracing their bold outlines with trembling fingers, understanding suddenly that shadows need not be brown, that perspective can flatten to serve emotion rather than reality. He buys prints with money meant for food, papering his walls with these visions from the East that seem to offer solutions to problems he didn't know he had been trying to solve. The Moulin de la Galette becomes his outdoor studio, where he learns to capture light not as it appears but as it feels, each brushstroke becoming looser, more confident, more alive with movement. Among the dancing couples and dappled shadows, Vincent sets up his easel with the determination of a scientist, conducting experiments in joy. The Impressionists have shown him that light breaks into 1,000 colours when you really look, that shadows contain purples and blues and greens that academic painting had forbidden. His brush begins to move in new ways, following the rhythm of the music drifting from the dance hall, each stroke a note in a visual melody that speaks of liberation from everything he thought he knew about painting. Toulouse-Lautrec introduces him to absinthe and the bohemian life, but Vincent finds more intoxication in the way morning light transforms a simple café into a cathedral of colour and shadow. The aristocratic dwarf with his wicked wit and tragic eyes recognizes in Vincent a fellow outsider, someone who sees too much and feels too deeply for polite society. They drink together in Montmartre's seedier establishments, but while Lautrec seeks oblivion, Vincent discovers revelation in the way gaslight plays across a prostitute's face, how dawn creeping through dirty windows can turn squalor into something approaching the divine. The green fairy whispers to him of new colour combinations, but it's the sober morning after that brings the real visions. Self-portraits multiply as Vincent uses his own face as a laboratory, experimenting with brushwork that grows more expressive, more urgent, as if he's trying to paint his very soul onto canvas. Each session before the mirror becomes a confrontation with himself. The artist studying the artist with an intensity that would frighten him if he stopped to think about it. Red beard rendered in slashes of orange and green, eyes that change colour depending on his mood, skin tones that owe more to emotion than to observation. He paints himself in different hats, different coats, against different backgrounds, but always with the same searching quality, as if one more portrait might finally reveal who he really is beneath all the failures and false starts. The relationship with Theo grows strained as their small apartment fills with Vincent's paintings, brilliant, unsellable canvases that represent pure artistic vision but practical disaster, The younger brother, so patient, so supportive, begins to show signs of wear, as paintings stack against every wall, as Vincent's manic energy disrupts the quiet order Theo needs after long days selling other people's art. They argue about money, about the future, about whether Vincent's new style represents breakthrough or breakdown. Theo continues to support him, but the cost shows in the tightness around his eyes, the way he sighs when another batch of paintings arrives from wherever Vincent has been working. Love persists, but it's a love tested by proximity and the relentless demands of genius without market. In Montmartre's studios, Vincent absorbs the techniques of pointillism and impressionism, but his temperament is too fiery for their scientific approach. He needs paint to move like his emotions, wild and uncontrolled. He watches Seurat place dots with mathematical precision, admires the theory but chafes at the practice. Pissarro tries to teach him patience, showing how colours mix in the eye rather than on the palette. But Vincent's brush refuses to be still long enough for such careful construction. He takes what he needs from each technique, the broken colour, the attention to light, the liberation from brown, but transforms it all into something uniquely his own, a style that seems to vibrate with nervous energy even when depicting the calmest scenes. The city's pace begins to wear on Vincent's nerves. Too many people, too much noise, too little connection to the natural world that feeds his artistic soul. He finds himself longing for horizons that aren't broken by buildings, for silence that isn't just the absence of human voices, but the presence of wind through wheat. The constant stimulation that initially excited him now feels like assault, each day bringing new theories, new arguments, new ways of seeing that leave him dizzy with possibility but starved for simplicity. He walks the city streets like a caged animal, painting urban scenes with increasing agitation, the brushstrokes growing more violent even as the colours grow more beautiful. His palette lightens dramatically as he learns to see shadows not as black voids but as coloured reflections, each surface bouncing light in ways that make the world shimmer with possibility. The muddy browns and blacks of his Dutch period give way to purples and blues, oranges and greens that sing against each other in harmonies he's only beginning to understand. He discovers that complementary colours placed side by side create vibrations that make the eye dance, that warm colours advance while cool colours recede, that the entire visible world is engaged in a constant conversation of hue and tone. His paintings begin to glow with an inner light that has nothing to do with accurate representation and everything to do with emotional truth. Friendships with Émile Bernard and Paul Gauguin introduce him to symbolism, the idea that art should express inner truth rather than outer appearance, giving philosophical weight to his emotional approach. Bernard, 20 years younger, but already formulating theories that will influence a generation, becomes Vincent's intellectual sparring partner, their conversations ranging from Japanese aesthetics to the spiritual purpose of art. Gauguin, with his brutal honesty and unshakable self-confidence, challenges Vincent to think beyond observation, to paint not what he sees, but what he dreams. These friendships provide the theoretical framework for what Vincent has always felt instinctively, that art's highest purpose is not to mirror reality, but to reveal the invisible forces that move beneath its surface. The Seine becomes his teacher as he paints its bridges and banks, learning how water reflects not just light, but the entire emotional atmosphere of a moment. He sets up his easel at different times of day, watching how the river changes from silver to gold to deep purple, how the same bridge can appear solid as stone or delicate as lace depending on the light. The flowing water speaks to something in Vincent's restless nature, its constant movement echoing his own inability to be still. He paints the industrial suburbs where the Seine carries the city's waste, finding beauty in the way pollution creates unexpected colours, how human activity leaves its mark on nature in ways both terrible and oddly moving. Restaurant interiors provide intimate subjects where Vincent can explore how artificial light creates entirely different moods than the sun, warmer, more human, more psychologically complex. The Café du Tambourin becomes a second home, its gas-lit interior offering endless variations on the theme of human gathering. He paints the proprietress, Agostina Segatori, with whom he has a brief, tumultuous affair, capturing in her worn beauty something of his own relationship with the night side of Paris. The yellow gaslight transforms faces into masks, creates shadows that speak of secrets, turns ordinary gatherings into mysterious rituals. These paintings pulse with a different energy than his outdoor work, more compressed, more psychologically charged, as if the walls themselves are pressing in on the inhabitants. His technique evolves rapidly, brushstrokes becoming more directional, more purposeful, as if each mark on canvas is a word in a visual language he's inventing. The tentative touches of his early work give way to bold slashes of colour, paint applied with palette knife or squeezed directly from tube when the brush proves too slow for his vision. He develops a vocabulary of marks, dots for energy, swirls for movement, parallel lines for rhythm, thick impasto for emphasis. Other artists begin to recognize his hand immediately, the way his surfaces seem to writhe with life even when depicting the most static subjects. This is no longer painting as representation, but painting as direct expression, each canvas a record of the artist's nervous system at work. The flower paintings of this period, sunflowers, irises, roses, reveal Vincent's growing mastery of colour harmony, but also his deep loneliness, as if he's painting the companions he lacks in life. He arranges bouquets with the care of a lover, studying how petals catch light, how stems create rhythms, how the space between flowers can be as important as the blooms themselves. The sunflowers especially obsess him, their faces following the sun like acolytes following a prophet, their golden petals speaking of a warmth he craves but cannot find in human company. He paints them again and again, each version an attempt to capture not just their appearance but their essence, loyalty, optimism, the simple grace of living things that know their purpose. Theo's art-dealing connections expose Vincent to the business side of art, deepening his contempt for a world that values paintings as commodities rather than spiritual experiences. He attends gallery openings where collectors discuss brushwork while ignoring meaning, where prices matter more than passion. The impressionists he admires are beginning to find success, but Vincent watches how market forces shape their work, how the need to sell influences what they choose to paint. He refuses to compromise, continuing to produce works that Theo diplomatically describes as challenging to potential buyers. The gulf between artistic integrity and commercial viability becomes a chasm that Vincent refuses to cross, even as he depends entirely on Theo's financial support. The decision to leave Paris grows from Vincent's realization that the city's sophistication is poisoning his connection to the simple, powerful emotions that fuel his best work. He feels himself becoming cerebral, theoretical, losing touch with the direct feeling that made his Dutch work so powerful despite its technical limitations. The endless talk in cafes, the constant analysis of technique and meaning, the competition among artists for recognition, all of it begins to feel like static interfering with the clear signal he needs to receive. He dreams of somewhere simpler, more elemental, where he can paint feelings rather than ideas, where the sun might burn away the complications that cloud his vision. He dreams of the south of France as a place where light and colour exist in their purest forms, where he can paint with the intensity that the grey Parisian sky seems to dampen. In his imagination, the south becomes a kind of Japan of Europe, a place where the lessons of the woodblock prince might find their natural expression. He reads about Provence with the fervour of a pilgrim studying maps to the Holy Land, imagining olive groves and cypress trees, sunflowers and lavender fields, all bathed in a light that will finally allow his colours to sing at full volume. The very names, Arles, Avignon, Aix, carry promises of transformation, of a climate that might finally match his internal temperature. The Japanese prints continue to influence his composition, bold outlines, flattened perspectives, decorative patterns that make everyday subjects feel exotic and sacred. He studies how Eastern artists eliminate unnecessary detail, how they use empty space as actively as filled space, how a single branch can suggest an entire tree. His copies of Japanese works are not mere exercises, but attempts to internalize a different way of seeing, to break free from Western perspective and its tyranny of realistic representation. He begins to outline his figures in blue or black, to flatten his backgrounds into decorative patterns, to see the picture plane not as a window, but as a surface where spiritual and material worlds can coexist without apology. His letters to Theo become more philosophical, outlining his theory that colour can express emotion more directly than any other artistic element. Yellow for joy, blue for infinity, red for passion. He writes with the fervour of a prophet who has received revelation, explaining how certain colour combinations can produce specific emotional states in viewers, how the artist's job is not to copy appearances, but to use colour as a musician uses notes. These letters reveal a mind working at fever pitch, synthesizing everything he's learned in Paris into a personal aesthetic that owes debts to many but belongs to none. Theo saves every letter, perhaps sensing that they contain not just brotherly communication, but the theoretical foundation of a new kind of art. The self-portraits grow more psychologically complex, showing not just Vincent's appearance, but his mental state, sometimes confident, sometimes haunted, always intensely alive. Each one becomes a report from the front lines of his internal battles, the eyes especially carrying messages about victories and defeats invisible to casual observers. He paints himself as bourgeois in a felt hat, as Japanese in a straw hat, as artist with easel and palette, each persona revealing different aspects of a personality too complex for any single image to contain. The backgrounds shift from neutral to patterned to swirling with energy, external environments reflecting internal weather with increasing accuracy. Preparation for departure involves choosing which paintings to take and which to leave, each decision a judgment on his artistic growth and a bet on his future development. He surveys the canvases filling the apartment, seeing in them a record of transformation, from the dark Dutch paintings that now embarrass him to the light-filled Paris works that point towards something not yet fully realized. Some paintings he destroys, unable to bear their testimony to failed experiments. Others he carefully rolls, knowing they contain seeds that might bloom in southern soil. Theo helps him pack, relieved at the prospect of reclaiming his living space, but worried about his brother venturing alone into the unknown. The final Paris paintings show a mastery of technique that would satisfy any academy, but also a restless energy that suggests Vincent has outgrown everything the city can teach him. His brushwork has achieved a confidence that makes earlier efforts look timid. His colour sense has developed to the point where he can orchestrate complex harmonies without thinking. His ability to capture light and movement rivals any impressionist. But something in these paintings strains against their boundaries, as if the artist is trying to express something for which he hasn't yet found the proper vocabulary. They succeed brilliantly as paintings, but fail as complete expressions of Vincent's vision, pointing toward a breakthrough that can only come elsewhere. As he packs for Arles, Vincent feels like a snake shedding its skin. The dark, heavy painter of peasants is being replaced by an artist who can make colour sing with joy. The physical act of packing becomes a ritual of transformation, each rolled canvas a chrysalis from which something new might emerge. He's 35 years old, has sold nothing, depends entirely on his brother's charity, and yet he feels on the verge of something magnificent. Paris has given him the technical tools and theoretical framework, but it has also shown him the limitations of urban sophistication. He needs earth under his feet, sun on his face, the simple subjects that allow for complex emotions. The train south carries him toward the most productive period of his life, but also toward the psychological breakdown that will make him legendary, art and madness intertwining like lovers in a dance. As the northern suburbs give way to countryside, then to the distinctive landscape of the south, Vincent presses his face to the window like a child, seeing in every olive tree and red-tiled roof the possibility of paintings yet to be born. He doesn't know that he has less than 3 years left, that the intensity he seeks will consume him, that the same sun that will make his colours sing will also burn his mind to ash. All he knows is that he's moving toward light, toward colour, toward a way of painting that will finally match the fever in his blood. The train carries him through the night toward Arles, toward glory and catastrophe, toward the terrible beauty of a vision too pure for this world to sustain. Arles, in February 1888, welcomes Vincent with Mediterranean light so intense. It seems to burn away the shadows that have clouded his vision for 35 years. The Mistral wind carries scents of wild herbs and promise. The train deposits him in a town that glows like honey in the winter sun, its Roman ruins and medieval ramparts speaking of permanence, while the almond trees prepare for their brief, ecstatic bloom. Vincent walks the streets with his painting supplies, feeling the southern light penetrate his very bones. He understands immediately. He has found the Japan of his dreams without crossing any ocean. The clarity of the air makes every colour sing louder than in the smoke-hazed north. That first evening he writes to Theo with hands trembling from excitement rather than cold, describing how even the shadows here contain more light than Paris sunshine. The yellow house becomes his sanctuary and studio. Its bright walls reflect the optimism that floods through him, as he realizes he's found the perfect environment for his artistic vision. He rents the right wing of the building on Place Lamartine, 4 rooms that need work, but offer northern light for painting and southern exposure for living. The walls are yellow inside and out, a colour that speaks to him of sunflowers and happiness, of the Japan he imagines where houses glow like lanterns. He spends his first weeks making it habitable, painting the doors green and the floors red, creating an environment where every surface participates in his celebration of colour. This is to be more than a studio. It's the foundation of his dreamed-of artistic colony, a place where painters will gather to work in the pure light, supporting each other's visions while developing their individual voices. Blossoming orchards provide his first southern subjects, pink and white petals against blue sky, painted with a joy so pure it seems to leap from the canvas and dance in the viewer's heart. He works like a man possessed, setting up his easel in different orchards each day, racing to capture the brief moment when the trees dress themselves in bridal white and baby pink. The paintings emerge with a freshness that surprises even him. Brushstrokes follow the rhythm of branches reaching toward light, petals rendered with touches so delicate they seem to tremble in imagined breeze. He paints 14 orchards in quick succession, each one a love letter to spring, to renewal, to the possibility of beginning again no matter how many times life has broken you. The bedroom painting captures his deep need for peace and stability. Every object is rendered with the loving attention of a man who has finally found home. He paints his simple room 3 times, adjusting the perspective to create a sense of shelter and rest. The walls closing in not claustrophobically but protectively. The bed dominates the composition, solid, inviting, promising the sleep that so often eludes him. 2 chairs suggest the possibility of companionship, while the portraits on the wall remind him of connections that transcend physical distance. The colours are bold, but harmonious, creating a visual lullaby that speaks of his desperate desire for a place where his restless spirit might finally find peace. Local peasants become his models, their sun-weathered faces providing the human element that grounds his increasingly abstract exploration of colour and emotion. The zouave soldier with his exotic uniform, the old peasant Patience Escalier with his knowing eyes, the Roulin family with their simple dignity. Each portrait becomes a meditation on character revealed through colour. Vincent pays them to sit, but gives them something more valuable than francs, immortality through paint. He captures not just their features but their essence, the way years of sun and wind have written stories on their skin, how their eyes hold the wisdom of those who work with their hands and live close to the earth. The starry night over the Rhône emerges from evening walks along the river. Vincent paints by candlelight to capture how darkness transforms familiar landscapes into mysterious dreamscapes. He sets up his easel at night, candles attached to his hat and palette, working by feel as much as sight to render the gaslights reflecting on water like fallen stars. The painting throbs with the energy of night itself, not the absence of day, but a different kind of illumination, where human lights dialogue with cosmic ones. The couple in the foreground provides scale and humanity, but it's the sky and water that carry the painting's message, about the infinite beauty available to those who dare to look beyond the ordinary. Sunflowers multiply across his canvases like a visual symphony. Each bloom is a note in his celebration of life's simple abundance, painted with brushstrokes that seem to pulse with their own energy. He paints them in every stage, fresh and proud, slightly wilted, gone to seed, finding beauty in each phase of their existence. The series is intended to decorate Gauguin's room, a welcome gift for the artist whose visit Vincent anticipates like a child awaiting Christmas. But the sunflowers become more than decoration. They're Vincent's manifesto about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, about how humble subjects can carry profound meaning when observed with sufficient love. The yellow explodes against blue backgrounds, orange centers spiral like galaxies, and the whole series vibrates with an energy that makes other still lives seem truly still by comparison. The postman Joseph Roulin becomes both friend and frequent subject. His honest face and kind heart represent the human connection Vincent craves, but struggles to maintain. Roulin sits for multiple portraits, his blue uniform and magnificent beard becoming as familiar to Vincent as his own reflection. More than a model, Roulin becomes a drinking companion, a checker of Vincent's sometimes fragile grasp on reality, a working man who treats the strange Dutch painter with the same respect he'd show any neighbour. Vincent paints Roulin's entire family, his wife Augustine with her rope-pulling hands, their children with faces still unmarked by life's disappointments. These portraits pulse with affection, each brushstroke a thank you for the simple gift of uncomplicated friendship. Self-portraits continue as Vincent documents his changing appearance. The southern sun darkens his skin, his eyes grow more intense, his expression more confident yet somehow more fragile. He paints himself against swirling backgrounds that seem to externalize his internal weather, the brushstrokes growing more agitated even as his technique becomes more assured. Each self-portrait is a report from the front lines of his battle to maintain equilibrium, while pushing his art to new extremes. The eyes especially tell the story, sometimes focused with laser intensity, sometimes glancing sideways as if checking for threats, always containing depths that no amount of paint can fully plumb. The cafe terrace at night transforms a simple evening scene into something magical. Yellow light spills onto cobblestones like liquid gold, showing how ordinary moments can become transcendent. Vincent sets up his easel on the Place du Forum, painting the cafe he frequents, but transforming it through his vision into something eternal. The yellow awning glows like a sun against the deep blue night. Stars remain visible despite the artificial illumination, as if insisting that human and cosmic light can coexist. The painting captures that perfect moment when day surrenders to night, when the first drinks are poured and conversations begin, when anything seems possible in the gentle conspiracy of darkness and gaslight. Letters to Theo overflow with excitement about colour theory and artistic technique, but also reveal growing isolation. Vincent realizes his intensity frightens away potential friends. He writes of complementary colours that make each other sing, of brushstrokes that follow the forms they describe, of the spiritual mission that drives him to paint, despite growing evidence that the world doesn't want what he offers. Between the technical discussions creep admissions of loneliness, of meals eaten alone, of conversations that end abruptly when his enthusiasm overwhelms his listeners. The letters become not just correspondence but a lifeline, the one place where Vincent can express himself fully without fear of rejection. The idea of an artist's colony obsesses him. He dreams of creating a southern refuge where painters can work together. supporting each other's vision while developing their individual styles. He furnishes the Yellow House with this dream in mind, preparing rooms for artists who exist more in his imagination than in reality. The colony would be a new kind of monastery, dedicated not to God but to art, which for Vincent amounts to the same thing. He writes to every artist he knows, painting word pictures of the light, the cheap living, the opportunity to create without the distractions and corruptions of city life. Most respond with polite deflections, sensing perhaps that Vincent's intensity might consume rather than nurture. Paul Gauguin's promised visit becomes the focus of all Vincent's hopes for artistic brotherhood. It leads him to paint furiously, to prove himself worthy of such collaboration. He decorates Gauguin's room with the sunflower paintings, prepares the studio for two, imagines the conversations they'll have about art and life. The anticipation drives him to new heights of productivity. Each painting becomes an argument for why Gauguin should not just visit, but stay. Vincent sees in Gauguin everything he lacks: confidence, worldliness, the ability to paint from imagination rather than observation. He prepares for the visit like a bride preparing for a wedding, never suspecting that his intensity might be precisely what will drive Gauguin away. The Red Vineyard, his only painting sold during his lifetime, captures the harvest season with brushwork so energetic it seems to vibrate with the workers' movements. The sale happens almost by accident, the painting catching the eye of Anna Bock at an exhibition. But for Vincent it represents validation that someone, somewhere, understands what he's trying to achieve. He paints the vineyard as if on fire, the red leaves creating a carpet of flame through which the workers move like figures in a medieval paradise. The brushstrokes follow no academic rules. Instead, they create their own logic of movement and emotion, each mark on the canvas a gesture of pure feeling translated into paint. Gauguin's arrival in October brings initial joy, but quickly reveals fundamental differences in artistic philosophy. Gauguin paints from imagination while Vincent needs direct observation. The first days pass in a honeymoon of shared enthusiasm, the two artists working side by side, discussing technique late into the night, but cracks appear almost immediately. Gauguin's method of synthesizing memories into symbolic compositions baffles Vincent, who needs the subject before him to release his vision. Gauguin finds Vincent's dependence on reality limiting, while Vincent sees Gauguin's imaginative approach as a kind of dishonesty. Their arguments begin as theoretical discussions, but quickly become personal, each man defending not just a method but an entire worldview. The two artists' relationship deteriorates. Vincent's emotional neediness clashes with Gauguin's cool professionalism, their arguments growing more heated as creative differences become personal conflicts. Vincent wants a brother, a soulmate, someone who will share his passionate engagement with art as spiritual practice. Gauguin wants a convenient arrangement that allows him to paint in good light with financial support. The Yellow House becomes a battlefield. Every meal risks becoming a confrontation. Vincent's desperate attempts at connection meet Gauguin's increasing coldness. The very qualities that attracted them, Vincent's passion and Gauguin's sophistication, become the sources of their mutual torture. The ear incident on December 23rd marks the end of Vincent's period of pure joy. His psychological breakdown manifests in an act of self-mutilation that shocks even him. The exact sequence of events remains unclear, clouded by Vincent's mental state and Gauguin's self-serving accounts. But the result is horrifyingly concrete. Vincent cuts off part of his ear in a gesture whose meaning even he cannot explain. Whether it follows a confrontation with Gauguin or emerges from internal pressures finally become unbearable. The act represents a crossing into territory from which there is no full return. The blood on the Yellow House floor marks the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, darker one. Hospitalization brings forced rest, but also terrible clarity about his mental fragility. He realizes that his artistic gift might be inseparable from psychological instability. In the hospital bed, bandaged and medicated, Vincent confronts the possibility. that the same sensitivity that allows him to see colors others miss might also make him vulnerable to breakdowns others can avoid. The doctors speak of epilepsy, of absinthe poisoning, of various diagnoses that explain nothing about why beauty hurts him so much he must translate it into paint or dye. He lies still, for once unable to work, forced to confront the question of whether his art is worth the price he and others pay for it. Self-portrait with bandaged ear becomes a meditation on suffering and creativity, painted with the steady hand of a man who has looked into madness and chosen to keep working. He paints himself against a Japanese print, as if insisting that beauty and pain can coexist in the same frame. The bandage is rendered matter-of-factly, neither hidden nor emphasized, simply another element in a composition that includes his easel, his pipe, his steady gaze. The painting refuses self-pity. Instead, it offers a clear-eyed assessment of an artist who has survived his own worst impulses and returned to the only thing that matters, the work. The people of Arles grow fearful of Vincent's erratic behaviour. Their petition to have him removed reveals how quickly acceptance can turn to rejection when mental illness becomes visible. The same neighbours who sat for portraits now cross the street to avoid him. The same children who watched him paint now throw stones. The petition, signed by 30 citizens, speaks of danger to the community. But Vincent knows it really speaks of fear of difference, of intensity, of anyone who refuses to hide their struggles behind closed doors. He reads the document with a mixture of hurt and understanding, recognizing that his presence has become a disruption they cannot tolerate. Theo's visit provides emotional support but also painful recognition. Vincent's condition is deteriorating despite his continued artistic productivity. The younger brother arrives to find Vincent lucid but fragile, still painting masterpieces but unable to maintain the basic stability required for independent living. They discuss options with the terrible clarity of those who love each other too much for comfortable lies. The asylum at Saint-Remy emerges as the best compromise, a place where Vincent can continue painting while receiving the supervision his condition requires. The decision breaks both their hearts, but they make it with the practicality of men who have learned that survival sometimes requires surrendering dreams. The asylum at Saint-Remy beckons as a refuge where Vincent can paint without frightening others, but also as an admission that he cannot function in normal society. The very word asylum carries meanings Vincent has spent his life trying to avoid: shelter, but also separation, safety, but also stigma. He prepares for the transition with characteristic practicality, packing his paints and canvases as carefully as another man might pack medicines. The irony doesn't escape him. He who dreamed of an artist's colony will instead join a colony of the troubled, finding his brotherhood among those whom society has declared unfit for its normal operations. His final Arles paintings show no diminishment of skill despite his psychological struggles. If anything, his brushwork becomes more expressive, more urgently beautiful. The orchards bloom again in his canvases, but now with an edge of desperation, as if he's trying to capture not just their appearance, but his entire relationship with beauty before it's too late. Each painting becomes a race against time, against his own mind, against the institutional future that awaits. The colours sing louder, the brushstrokes dance more wildly, as if the approaching confinement has paradoxically freed him to take greater risks. Leaving the yellow house feels like exile from paradise. But Vincent knows he must seek treatment if he wants to continue painting, his art now literally a matter of life and death. He takes a last walk through the rooms he painted with such hope, seeing in their emptiness a reflection of his abandoned dreams of artistic community. Yet even in this moment of defeat, he maintains the clarity that has always been his gift and curse. He knows that painting is not just what he does, but who he is, and that preserving his ability to work justifies any sacrifice. The train to Saint-Remy carries him away from the light that transformed his art, toward a different kind of illumination, the inner light that burns regardless of external circumstances, the flame that no amount of darkness can fully extinguish. Saint-Remy Asylum provides safety but also confinement. Vincent's world shrinking to a small room in a walled garden, yet somehow his artistic vision expands to cosmic proportions. The former monastery sits among olive groves and wheat fields, its thick walls meant to contain the troubled souls within. But for Vincent, they become a frame through which he views infinity. His cell measures 12 feet by 8, furnished with an iron bed and a wooden chair. Yet from this cramped space emerge paintings that seem to breathe with the vastness of the universe itself. The routine is rigid, meals at set times, medication administered by orderlies who speak in hushed tones, walks in the garden only when supervised. But within these constraints, Vincent's imagination soars higher than ever before. He writes to Theo that the very limitations force him to look inward, to paint not just what he sees, but what he dreams, what he remembers, what burns behind his closed eyelids during the long nights when sleep refuses to come. The starry night emerges from his asylum window view, transforming the ordinary landscape into a swirling vision of cosmic energy, painted from memory and imagination rather than direct observation. He cannot paint at night here, the rules forbid it, so he stores the image in his mind, the way stars pulse and spiral, how the village below huddles beneath the infinite sky like souls seeking shelter from eternity. When morning comes, he translates this vision onto canvas with brushstrokes that follow no earthly logic, creating a sky that moves like Van Gogh's own turbulent thoughts made visible. The cypress tree rises like a dark flame connecting earth to heaven, while the village sleeps peacefully below, unaware of the cosmic drama playing out above. This is not the night as others see it, but as Vincent feels it, alive, dynamic, full of forces that speak to those who dare to listen. The painting will become his most famous work, yet he mentions it only briefly in letters, as if he knows it comes from a place too deep for words. Irises bloom in the asylum garden like purple flames, Vincent painting them with a tenderness that suggests he sees in their beauty a reflection of his own fragile resilience. He works on the painting during his first week at Saint-Rémy, when everything is still new and frightening, finding in the flowers a kind of companionship that human contact cannot provide. The irises stand proud despite their delicate petals, their purple heads nodding in an unfelt breeze, surrounded by marigolds that glow like small suns. He paints them life-size, giving them the monumentality usually reserved for human portraits. Understanding that in this place where human dignity is so easily lost, flowers maintain their grace without effort. The brushwork is confident despite his recent breakdown, each stroke placed with the sureness of an artist who knows that beauty exists even in places of confinement, perhaps especially there. Episodes of mental illness interrupt his work unpredictably, leaving him unable to paint for weeks at a time, then driving him to create with manic intensity when clarity returns. The attacks come without warning, a tightening in his chest, colours becoming too bright, sounds too loud, then darkness that swallows days or weeks whole. During these episodes they remove his paints, fearing he might drink them, leaving him with nothing but the bare walls and his own racing thoughts. When the fog lifts, he returns to his easel with desperate hunger, painting as if making up for lost time, as if each canvas might be his last. The other patients watch him work with a mixture of awe and fear, recognizing in his intensity something of their own struggles made visible. Dr. Peyron notes in his records the correlation between Vincent's attacks and his periods of greatest productivity, wondering if the illness and the genius are two faces of the same coin. Self-portraits from this period show a man aged beyond his years, eyes that have seen too much, yet hands that remain steady enough to create masterpieces. He paints himself against swirling backgrounds that seem to externalize his inner turmoil, the brushstrokes creating halos of energy around his head like visualizations of thought itself. The bandage is gone, but something in his gaze speaks of wounds that run deeper than flesh. Each self-portrait becomes a medical chart rendered in paint, documenting not symptoms, but the human being who endures them. He experiments with different color harmonies, blues and oranges, greens and reds, as if searching for the combination that might finally explain who he is. The paintings accumulate like entries in a visual diary, each one capturing a slightly different version of Vincent, all of them true. The Wheatfield series captures the view from his window through different seasons, each painting a meditation on time's passage and nature's eternal cycles of death and renewal. He watches the field change from green to gold to brown, finding in these transformations a mirror for his own cycles of clarity and confusion. The wheat becomes a recurring character in his visual narrative, sometimes standing proud and full, sometimes bent by wind, sometimes reduced to stubble after harvest. He paints the reapers not as harbingers of death, but as necessary participants in life's rhythm, their scythes catching light like benedictions. These paintings pulse with an acceptance of mortality that feels hard-won, as if Vincent has made peace with the idea that all things must pass, including suffering. Copies of masterworks by Delacroix and Millet provide therapeutic exercises. Vincent's interpretations transforming classical compositions through his unique colour sensibility and emotional intensity. When he cannot work outdoors, when original subjects feel too overwhelming, he turns to reproductions, translating other artists' visions through his own prismatic sensibility. Millet's peasants emerge from Vincent's brush clothed in colours the original artist never imagined, purples and oranges where brown once reigned. Delacroix's religious scenes explode with yellows and blues that transform suffering into something almost joyful. These are not mere copies but conversations across time. Vincent speaking with the masters in the only language he truly knows. The exercise grounds him, provides structure when his own visions threaten to scatter like startled birds. Letters to Theo become more philosophical, Vincent grappling with questions of art's purpose and the relationship between creativity and mental suffering. He writes by candlelight after the evening medication, when the asylum settles into its troubled sleep, his pen moving across paper with the same urgency that drives his brush across canvas. The letters explore whether his illness enhances or hinders his art, whether the visions that torment him are the same ones that allow him to see beauty others miss. He quotes Delacroix and Rembrandt, building arguments about colour theory and spiritual purpose, but always returning to the central question: is the price of his gift too high? Theo's responses provide ballast, reminding Vincent that his work brings joy to others, that suffering transformed into beauty serves a purpose beyond the personal. The mulberry tree painting demonstrates his continued technical evolution. Branches rendered with such dynamic energy they seem to dance against the swirling sky. He paints it in October, when the leaves turn yellow like coins scattered by a generous hand, the twisted trunk speaking of endurance through seasons of hardship. The brushstrokes follow the tree's natural rhythms but amplify them, creating movement where others might see only stillness. The ground beneath swirls with fallen leaves rendered in touches of orange and red, while the sky above pulses with that particular Saint-Remy blue that seems to contain all of Vincent's longing for freedom. This is nature not as backdrop, but as protagonist. Every element of the composition contributing to a sense of life force that cannot be contained by any wall. Olive trees become obsessive subjects, their gnarled forms perfect vehicles for Vincent's increasingly expressive brushwork and his identification with all things twisted yet beautiful. He paints them in every light, from the silver-green shimmer of morning to the blue-black shadows of evening, finding in their ancient endurance a kind of hope. The trees have survived centuries, their trunks recording in twisted wood every drought, every storm, yet still they bear fruit, still they reach toward light. Vincent's brush follows their contortions with something approaching reverence, creating rhythms that pulse with life force. He writes to Theo that the olive trees understand him, that their twisted beauty speaks to his condition better than any doctor's diagnosis. News of Theo's engagement and impending fatherhood brings joy, but also anxiety, about his financial dependence on his brother's generosity. The letter arrives on a good day, when Vincent is clear enough to feel the full weight of its implications. his little brother, his lifeline, will soon have other responsibilities, other claims on his resources and attention. Vincent responds with genuine happiness for Theo's joy, but his next paintings carry an undercurrent of urgency, as if he must prove his worth through productivity. He calculates obsessively how many canvases per month justify Theo's support, whether his improving technique might finally lead to sales. The approaching birth becomes a deadline in his mind, spurring him to work even when his body begs for rest. The Pine Trees painting shows Vincent's growing ability to find the extraordinary in the ordinary, transforming simple garden subjects into monuments of natural beauty. The trees stand like sentinels against a sky that swirls with Vincent's signature energy, their green needles rendered in thousands of individual strokes that somehow cohere into solid form. He paints them from below, giving them the monumentality of cathedral spires, their trunks twisted by wind into shapes that speak of struggle and survival. The painting vibrates with a kind of religious feeling, as if these trees are nature's prayers made visible. Even the ground beneath them receives careful attention, patches of light and shadow creating a carpet of visual rhythm that supports the vertical thrust of the trees. Dr. Perron's cautious optimism about Vincent's condition provides hope, but also pressure to prove that he can function outside institutional walls. The doctor, kind but clinical, speaks of improvement in terms of days without incident, meals eaten calmly, conversations maintained without agitation. Vincent performs sanity like a role he's learning, knowing that his freedom depends on convincing this well-meaning man that the fire inside has been banked to manageable levels. Yet the very effort of appearing normal exhausts him, and he retreats to his easel where he can be fully himself, where intensity is not symptom but method. The paintings from this period of relative stability show no diminishment of power. If anything, they grow more confident, as if Vincent is storing up beauty against future darkness. The decision to leave Saint-Remy grows from Vincent's need for human connection, and his fear that prolonged isolation will destroy his artistic development. He watches fellow patients who've been here for years, sees how the routine meant to heal slowly erodes individuality, how safety can become its own kind of death. His art needs the friction of the world, the challenge of new subjects, the possibility of recognition that these walls prevent. He writes to Theo of feeling like a caged bird who's forgotten how to sing, of colours growing dull from too much repetition. The asylum has served its purpose, providing shelter during his most vulnerable time, but now it threatens to become a tomb for his still living talent. Auvers promises a middle ground, rural peace without institutional confinement, supervised freedom under Dr. Gachet's care. Theo arranges everything with his characteristic efficiency, finding in Dr. Gachet not just a physician, but an art lover who might understand Vincent's particular needs. The town sits close enough to Paris for visits, but far enough to avoid the city's overwhelming stimulation. Vincent reads about it with growing excitement. The thatched cottages, the Gothic church, the wheat fields that stretch to the horizon. It sounds like the kind of place where he might finally find balance, where he can paint with the freedom his vision requires while still having support when the darkness threatens. His final Saint-Remy paintings show no decline in quality, despite his mental struggles. If anything, his technique becomes more confident, more personally expressive. The last canvases completed within these walls demonstrate complete mastery of his revolutionary style. Brush strokes that dance with life, colours that sing in harmonies only Vincent can hear. He paints with the urgency of departure, trying to capture every lesson learned in this place of confinement and revelation. A final painting of the corridor shows the asylum interior transformed by his vision into something almost beautiful, the institutional green walls pulsing with subtle life, the barred windows creating patterns of light that speak of both imprisonment and the possibility of release. The train to Auvers carries him toward his final chapter. 69 paintings completed in just over a year, proving that creativity can flourish even in the darkest circumstances. He sits by the window watching the landscape change from the dry Mediterranean light of the south to the softer greens of the north, each mile taking him further from the safety of routine and closer to the uncertain freedom he's craved. His painting supplies are carefully packed, his canvases from Saint-Remy rolled and protected, carrying with them the record of a year that tested every limit of endurance. He doesn't know that he has only 70 days left, that Auvers will be his final station. All he knows is that he's moving toward new subjects, new light, new possibilities for the art that remains his only constant. Looking back at the asylum, Vincent sees both prison and sanctuary, the place where he learned that art could be a form of prayer, a way of transforming suffering into beauty. The building recedes into memory, but the lessons learned within its walls travel with him. That limitation can spark innovation, that darkness makes light more precious, that beauty exists even in places of deep sorrow. He's leaving with more than paintings. He carries the knowledge that his art can survive anything, that as long as he can hold a brush, he has reason to continue. The wheat fields of Auvers await, golden and infinite, ready to receive his final testament. The train carries him through the afternoon toward evening, toward the doctor who collects artists like specimens, toward the room above the cafe where he'll paint his last, toward the wheat field where crows will rise like dark thoughts against a troubled sky. But for now, he simply watches the world pass by, his painter's eye automatically composing, always composing, turning the ordinary journey into frames of extraordinary beauty that only he can see. Vincent's final 70 days in Auvers blaze with creative intensity. The portrait of Dr. Gachet, the church at Auvers, and Wheatfield with crows, each canvas a farewell letter to a world that never quite understood his vision, yet now treasures every brushstroke as sacred. In that small room above Ravou's cafe, he paints with the urgency of someone who senses time running short, nearly a painting a day, each one more emotionally charged than the last. Dr. Gachet sits for his portrait, with eyes that mirror Vincent's own sadness. The church rises against a cobalt sky, like a ship sailing toward eternity, and the wheat fields, they stretch endlessly under skies both beautiful and ominous. These aren't just paintings anymore. They're visual prayers, final testimonies, love letters to a beauty that burns too bright to sustain. When the end comes in that wheat field, when the gunshot echoes across the golden grain, Vincent's last words to Theo are, "La tristesse durera toujours." The sadness will last forever. Yet what endures is not sadness, but the joy he captured, the light he preserved, the beauty he saw even through tears. As you drift toward sleep, let Vincent's story remind you. The most beautiful art often springs from the deepest struggles. Passion and pain can be transformed into something that touches hearts across centuries. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give the world is simply to keep creating, no matter how dark the night may seem. His paintings now hang in museums like windows into another way of seeing. They teach millions that sunflowers can be suns, that night skies can swirl with cosmic energy, that a simple bedroom can hold all the peace in the world. From that failed preacher who found his pulpit in pigment, we learn that our truest calling might be hidden in what seems like failure. Rejection can redirect us toward our authentic path. Vincent sold one painting in his lifetime, yet now his works are priceless. Proof that recognition may come slowly, but truth endures. So close your eyes and let his colors wash over you. Somewhere in museums and homes around the world, his sunflowers still turn their faces toward light. His stars still dance, his wheat fields still wave in eternal wind. In every brushstroke lives his message. Beauty exists everywhere for those brave enough to see it. Suffering can be alchemized into gold. Art is not luxury but necessity, as essential as bread, as vital as breath, as eternal as the human heart that refuses to stop hoping, creating, and loving, even in the face of a world that doesn't always understand. Rest now, and may your dreams be painted in Vincent's colours, bold, beautiful, and forever true.